Welcome back to Airline Tales. Don't forget to subscribe. It was a typical warm night at Kuala Lumpur International Airport on March 8, 2014. The bustling terminal saw passengers from all over the world preparing for their flights, business trips, vacations, family reunions. Among them, 239 souls would soon board Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, an overnight flight scheduled to take them to Beijing, China. For the 227 passengers and 12 crew members, it was to be just another routine flight. On board were people from various walks of life, students returning from vacation, business professionals attending important meetings, families traveling together. The youngest passenger was a 2-year-old child, while the eldest was a 76-year-old retiree. The flight crew, led by Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a seasoned veteran with over 18,000 hours of flying experience, and his co-pilot, Fariq Abdul Hamid, were experienced professionals, confident in their abilities. MH370, a Boeing 777-200ER, was considered one of the safest planes in the skies. It seemed nothing could go wrong. As passengers settled into their seats oblivious to what lay ahead, the aircraft taxied to the runway. Families said their goodbyes over phone calls and messages, fully expecting to reunite in just a few short hours. At 12:41 a.m., the plane took off smoothly into the night sky, leaving behind the bright lights of Kuala Lumpur. The flight ascended to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet and began its journey north towards Beijing. The passengers likely reclined in their seats, the hum of the engines lulling some into sleep. Some may have glanced out the windows, seeing only the endless darkness of the sky, the twinkling lights of stars far above, and the peaceful expanse of the South China Sea below. For the next 38 minutes, all seemed perfectly normal. But soon, the quiet calm of the night would be shattered. At 1:19 a.m., after crossing into Vietnamese airspace, Captain Zahari made a routine radio call to Malaysian Air Traffic Control, signing off with the words, "Good night, Malaysian 370. These words were calm, routine, nothing out of the ordinary. But what followed would baffle investigators for years to come. Seconds later, MH370's transponder, responsible for transmitting key data about the plane's location, altitude, and speed, was switched off. The plane, once clearly visible to air traffic controllers on their radar screens, vanished without a trace. It was as if the massive Boeing 777 had simply disappeared from the face of the earth. As MH370 passed from Malaysian to Vietnamese airspace, air traffic control attempted to make contact, but no response came. Minute after minute passed, and still, there was nothing. Controllers from Malaysia, Vietnam, and eventually neighboring countries all tried to reach the aircraft, but silence was the only answer. At first, confusion reigned. Air traffic controllers and airline officials were unsure what to make of the missing flight. Could it be a communication error? A technical glitch? Perhaps the transponder malfunctioned and the plane was still flying as planned. But as hours passed, a deepening sense of unease set in. Flight MH370 was missing. When the plane failed to arrive in Beijing as scheduled, panic erupted. Families gathered at Beijing Capital International Airport, anxiously waiting for news. The minutes stretched into hours as Malaysian Airlines scrambled to provide information. News of the disappearance spread rapidly, sparking shock and disbelief across the globe. For the families of those aboard, the hours turned into an agonizing nightmare. At first, there was hope. Perhaps the plane had diverted to another airport. Maybe there had been an emergency landing or a minor technical issue. But as the hours dragged on without any communication, hope began to fade, replaced by fear and desperation. In the coming days, the disappearance of MH370 became front-page news worldwide. Television screens were filled with the distraught faces of relatives, pleading for answers, desperate for any shred of information. In Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia Airlines opened a crisis center, while in Beijing, angry and grief-stricken families demanded transparency from the authorities. What followed was one of the largest and most complex search efforts in aviation history. Initially, rescue teams focused on the South China Sea, the area where MH370 was last seen on civilian radar. Ships and planes from multiple countries scoured the waters, looking for debris or any signs of the missing aircraft. But as days passed, it became clear that the plane had not crashed in the South China Sea. Then came the first major breakthrough, a series of pings, or handshakes, between MH370 and Inmarsat, a British satellite communications company. These pings, although not transmitting detailed data, indicated that the plane had continued to fly for several hours after it vanished from radar. Analysis of these signals revealed a shocking twist. Instead of continuing north towards Beijing, the plane had made a sharp turn to the west, crossing back over the Malaysian peninsula. From there, it traveled along a path over the Andaman Sea and then southward into one of the most remote and treacherous parts of the world, the southern Indian Ocean. For many, this revelation raised more questions than answers. Why had the plane veered so dramatically off course? Who was in control of the aircraft? And why had the transponder been deliberately turned off? As search teams recalibrated, efforts shifted to a vast, isolated stretch of the Indian Ocean, thousands of miles from the flight's intended route. The waters in this region are some of the deepest and most hostile on the planet, with depths reaching nearly 20,000 feet. The search area covered over 1.5 million square miles, an expanse larger than France. Ships, planes, and submarines from several nations joined the search, but the ocean seemed to swallow MH370 whole. Weeks turned into months, and months into years. Despite deploying state-of-the-art sonar equipment, underwater drones, and military-grade technology, no trace of the aircraft could be found. The ocean depths, combined with unpredictable weather patterns and powerful underwater currents, made the search incredibly challenging. MH370 had seemingly disappeared into the abyss. It wasn't until July 29, 2015, that the first piece of debris was discovered. A flaperon, a part of the aircraft's wing, was found washed up on the shores of Réunion Island, a remote French territory in the Indian Ocean, more than 2,300 miles from the search area. The discovery ignited a flicker of hope. Finally, there was tangible evidence that MH370 had indeed met its fate in the southern Indian Ocean. Over the following years, additional debris washed ashore on islands and coastlines across the Indian Ocean, seat cushions, engine fragments, and interior paneling. Each piece was painstakingly analyzed, confirming their origin as MH370. Yet despite these fragments, the main wreckage and the black boxes, which held the key to understanding what happened in the plane's final moments, remained elusive. As the years passed and with no concrete answers, the disappearance of MH370 became fertile ground for theories, some rational, others bordering on the fantastical. One of the most plausible theories focused on the pilot, Captain Zahari. An experienced and well-respected aviator, Zahari's personal life and mental health came under scrutiny. Some speculated that he might have deliberately diverted the plane as part of a suicide mission. Zahari had a home flight simulator, and investigators discovered that he had plotted a course eerily similar to MH370's final path. But no concrete evidence of his involvement has ever been found. Other theories proposed more sinister scenarios. Could the plane have been hijacked? Some suggested that cyber terrorism could have played a role, with hackers gaining control of the plane's systems remotely. Yet, no group ever claimed responsibility, and the lack of communication made this theory less likely. Others speculated about a massive failure of the aircraft's systems. Could the cabin have depressurized, causing the pilots and passengers to lose consciousness while the plane flew on autopilot until it ran out of fuel? This ghost flight theory gained traction, but couldn't explain why the transponder was turned off, or why the plane deviated so sharply from its course. For every theory, there seemed to be an equally compelling counterargument, leaving investigators and the public to wonder, would the truth ever be known? While the world speculated, the families of the 239 people on board were trapped in an agonizing limbo. For them, the disappearance wasn't just a mystery, it was a personal tragedy, one that left them with no closure. How do you grieve for a loved one when you don't know their fate? How do you move on without answers? In Beijing, Kuala Lumpur, and beyond, relatives continued to demand accountability. Many felt the authorities had failed them, either through lack of transparency or inadequate search efforts. In China, some families held vigils, their faces a mixture of grief and desperation. In Malaysia, others protested, pleading for the search to continue. In January 2017, after nearly 3 years of searching, the official hunt for MH370 was called off. Despite covering more than 46,000 square miles of the Indian Ocean seafloor, the wreckage remained unfound. The governments of Malaysia, Australia, and China, who had spearheaded the effort, declared that without new credible leads, they could no longer justify the immense cost and logistical challenges of continuing the search. For many, this decision felt like a final betrayal. The families had been promised answers, yet they were left with only more questions. Could the plane still be lying in some uncharted underwater trench? Could a new technology, yet to be developed, someday reveal the truth? More than a decade later, the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of modern aviation. It is a story of loss, of unanswered questions, and of the limits of human knowledge. Despite all the technological advancements, all the resources poured into the search, and the countless hours of investigation, MH370's fate remains shrouded in uncertainty. The story of MH370 is not just about a missing plane. It is a story of the fragility of human life, of how even in an age of unprecedented connectivity, something as vast and untamable as the ocean can swallow a part of us whole, leaving only traces of what once was. In the end, MH370 leaves behind a legacy of heartbreak and hope. Heartbreak for the families who never got to say goodbye, and hope that someday the mystery will be solved, and the world will finally learn what happened to those 239 souls who boarded a flight on a routine night in March 2014, never to be seen again.